Hello, I'm Caroline Fairchild, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. Today is Pride Day, and all month long, corporate America has been celebrating LGBTQ culture. But in spite of the advancements made, there is still a lot more work to be done to make work a safe place for queer folks everywhere. So what does that look like, and how do we keep the momentum going beyond the month of June? Joining me now to discuss is Christie Smith. She's Senior Managing Director at Accenture. She's responsible for Accenture's inclusion and diversity client practice. Her career includes senior roles at Apple and Deloitte. She received her PhD from New York University and was named to Fast Company's second annual Queer 50 list. Christie, welcome to LinkedIn News Live.
It's great to be with you, Caroline. How are you?
I'm good. It's been too long. It's a little hot here in New York. I know it's a little hot for you there in Seattle, but I'm excited to be with you virtually.
Well, I'm excited to be with you and in air conditioning.
I don't have AC, so just all the viewers out there, just know that I'm hankering down here just with a fan, actually. So we'll get through it. So Happy Pride Day, Happy Pride Month. Talk to us a little bit about what Accenture has been doing to celebrate.
Well, this is my favorite month of every year, and especially now being new at Accenture, the sense of inclusion, belonging, celebration all month long, and frankly, all year long is really unprecedented in my career here at Accenture. So we're having celebrations around the world, and every leadership call I get on starts with a happy Pride or someone wearing a Pride lanyard or pin. So we are celebrating all month long.
And when you think back, let's go back way to the beginning of your career. Where was the private sector then in terms of conversations around the LGBT community and supporting them in the workplace?
Well, I like that you said way back then, because that is actually accurate.
I did not mean that by number of years, Christie. You just have had so many impressive jobs that I just feel like you're quite the trailblazer. So that's by that.
I'm calling it on myself as more than anything else, Caroline. So I would say when I started my career, we were hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from where we are now. I certainly never felt that I could be my true self when I started out in my career. And I did all the things that I hear people have done, and unfortunately that some people are still struggling with, no matter where you are around the world, and that is changing pronouns, hiding who I am. This was certainly not a topic. LGBTQI rights was not a topic in the workplace, in the private sector, much less the public sector, when I started my career. It really wasn't until I was well into my career that we began to see at least more acceptance in the places that I worked for LGBTQI community. So we've come a long way.
And when you think back to moments in your career where there have been gains, what have some of those big gains been for you? Are there specific instances or times when you were working where you thought, okay, we have made progress? And then what do those times look like for you?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple big moments for me in my life where I saw seismic change. One was a personal change. When I decided to join Deloitte many years ago, that was the first job I decided I wasn't going to hide who I was in the interviewing process. And I can remember the guy that hired me, I sat down and he asked me about myself. And it was the first time I shared that I had a partner, that I used the pronoun she, and there was just no stop, no awkward silence. It was a part of, that's great. So tell me more about yourself. Tell me more about her. And that was a watershed moment for me, that I felt like I was, really found the place that I wanted to be and I could be myself. The second, of course, was meeting Robbie Kaplan. And when we saw her litigate for gay marriage and the advancement of gay marriage, no question in my mind, that was an enormous moment. I'll never forget where I was when that happened. And then I would say the third moment is really now. having been fortunate enough to live in my true self in terms of my sexuality, and to be able to be at a company that I think is second to none, Accenture, with regards to belonging, with regards to its commitment to inclusion and diversity, I feel like I've reached the pinnacle of my career, and I'm in a place that feels like family.
And I'm sure so many people in this stream are just so inspired by your career. But look, we're looking at some research here on LinkedIn that shows that a lot of people are still struggling to bring their full self to work from the LGBT community. We see here that 24% of LGBTQ plus professionals are not out at work. 26% worry they'll be treated differently. But on the flip side, 27% are saying that they feel like a weight was lifted when they did come out. Christie, in terms of getting these numbers in better shape here, where do the gains still need to be brought so that people from the LGBT community feel like they can bring their whole self to work?
Well, I think it starts in a couple of places. It starts with individual managers. It starts with allies within the organization that these individuals are in on a micro level. On a macro level, though, we have much more legislation that needs to be passed to protect the LGBTQ community. The fact of the matter is, many individuals who identify as LGBTQI plus still will lose their jobs just by virtue of the fact if they come out or if they're found out to be gay for no reason but their sexuality. This is unacceptable in this country. And so we need to still fight for equality. The second is, as the lines between private and public sector really have begun to diminish, we have seen very courageous companies and leaders in companies over the last 10 years come out for gay rights. I think we need to still continue to do that as leaders in companies like Accenture, like the ones I've worked at Apple and at Deloitte. We need to continue to be leaders in talking about equality for all.
Christie, I'm going to go ahead and say hello to some members who are joining us in the stream right now for this important conversation. We have Christine joining us from New York City. She's probably also very hot right now, like I am.
Yeah.
Tracy from Houston, Shanine from Baltimore, and Anita from the Bay Area. Thanks for joining us here on LinkedIn News Live. And if you are just joining us here in the stream with Accenture's Christie Smith right now, we're talking everything related to Pride and celebrating Pride Month and the role that the private sector plays in supporting the rights of LGBTQ plus in the workplace. So if you have questions about any of that or want to know more about Christie's career, she's an amazing woman, let us know in the stream and we'll have a conversation about that on today's show. Christie, you talk a little bit about the growing role that the private sector has in just supporting diversity and inclusion more broadly. I haven't spoken to you in a while. How do you feel like the events of past summer with just the reckoning that we've been seeing against systemic racism, how has that changed the conversation more broadly that you're seeing when it comes to D&I and the role that the private sector plays there?
Caroline, I can remember talking to you, 7-8 years ago, and we were talking about that fundamentally that companies continue to take the same approach to inclusion and diversity and expect a different outcome. And back then when we spoke, I was very passionate, and I'm even more so now, about the fact that more needs to be done, more accountability needs to be had. Different types of interventions need to be made at companies. Fast forward in the last year, I am both heartened and sickened by the fact that it's taken yet another man's life or another Black person's life to move our communities in the private sector forward to say enough is enough, and to really step forward and invest in their people, invest and take a stand on racism and on marginalized communities like they've had to do in the last year. I think it's not enough for companies to just make contributions of millions of dollars to outside organizations. That money needs to be spent in the companies themselves on building up diversity and inclusion initiatives, on making sure that marginalized communities actually feel a part of the culture and that they feel that they can advance in their careers at the companies that they're in. We've been trying and saying that recruiting is the answer to inclusion and diversity for 40 years, but representation at the top hasn't changed. So it's not the recruiting, it's actually keeping those people and giving them a sense that they can thrive and have a sense of opportunity in their careers at the companies that they're with. So I think the last year has done a lot in opening up a real honest conversation, moving away from just counting heads to taking responsibility, leaders themselves taking responsibilities for the cultures that they create and for retaining their talent who is diverse and who identifies as diverse.
I'm hearing the conversation move more dramatically towards retention and what retention looks like and inclusion. For those who are joining us in the stream right now, and perhaps our managers perhaps are trying to move some metrics within their own companies, what does that actually look like, Christie? Because I feel like we talk a lot about, there's a lot of words here. We're talking diversity, inclusion, retention, recruiting, but what does it actually look like on the ground? How do you know if your culture is open in terms of making sure that everyone feels included?
Yeah, I think that I just want to start by saying that companies make a real mistake in just looking at metrics. We've seen an influx of companies over the last 10 years kind of reporting their numbers and very little movement in being made of total representation. And that is because companies haven't spent enough time using data and analytics at the point of culture and leadership and measuring leaders' behaviors, how they speak, their interactions with their employees, looking at an individual basis of leaders and how they promote, how they pay, how they give assignments to their employees. It has to start at looking at the data of leaders, not counting heads of the diverse populations themselves. That simply hasn't worked. Also, we have a tremendous capability now today to look at data and analytics and drive insights with regards to culture and what is actually working in cultures to create a sense of opportunity, to create a sense of being net better off for employees and a sense of growth for employees. And so we have more data and analytics than we've ever had. What we lack and what we need more of is the courage to act on that data when it is around leaders and the cultures that they create, not just asking for those diverse populations to solve for their own issues of not being able to thrive within their organizations.
Well, speaking of diverse populations being asked to solve their own problems, of course, nothing is going to change without true allyship and allyship on the ground. Christie, have there been moments in your career where allyship has really stepped up? You've have specific moments where you've seen true allyship that's helped you in your career?
Without a doubt. As I was sharing with you when I joined Deloitte, the guy that hired me and ended up going on to be the chairman, he was an incredible ally to me from the moment that I met him. And that actually changed the game for me because he was my boss and I worked with him and joined the firm under his tutelage. And he really allowed me to be my whole self at work. You know, I am blessed through my experiences to have a whole group of women who sit in the C-suite and who are great allies to me. They are both LGBTQI themselves, and some are just my heterosexual allies, but all have supported me in my career and frankly, in my life. I also have just an incredible family. I've been really fortunate. I'm the youngest of 8 kids, so I grew up with a whole network of support. And so they really have been allies for me in my life as well. I would say certainly being at Accenture, I've really been blessed with a tremendous allyship coming into a senior role. The support that this company and my colleagues have given me in this very brand new role for me has been unprecedented. And it's why I say that it really feels like I have a family here at Accenture.
One of the youngest of 8, Christie, is that right? Did you just say that?
I did just say that.
That's a lot of kids.
I grew up in a competitive marketplace, and I would suggest if we ever get to have dinner, Caroline, watch out. I'm going to go for the roles. I might.
Yeah, my producer will correct me if I'm wrong, but we're sitting down with United's CEO on Wednesday, and I think he is one of 8. I think he has 8 kids too. He has a lot of kids.
I've read that. So it's really kind of remarkable how many senior executives I've met who come from very large families. So it's a built-in team of knowing how to work a system and how to come together as a team.
There's a business leadership book out there that someone needs to write about that, because that sounds great to me.
There you go. That's a great idea.
I'm going to bring in some comments that we're seeing in the stream right now. One from Rob, who's saying that the issue of coming out also depends on the industry one works in. Some are more LGBTQ plus friendly than others. I guess, Christie, what's your take on that? Are there some industries that you feel like are really leading the way right now? And what are they doing? And what can industries that are still kind of lacking in this regard learn from them?
Yeah, I think that it's a great call out. I do think that there are some industries where it's harder for an individual to come out. And I wouldn't want to generalize to say what those industries are, because I'm a consultant. I've worked for thousands of companies in my day, and some in industries that might say that they are the difficult ones for an LGBTQ person to live their full self. I will say, however, that, even in my career experience, being a consultant, I actually am forced every time I meet a new client to have to come out. I wear a wedding ring. I am married to my wonderful wife, Kelly, and we've been married a long time, but people will look at my left hand and my ring and they'll say, "Oh, what does your husband do?" And that happens a lot on a client site. Now, I'm privileged to know and be in a position that I'm not going to hide myself and that I have a company that will stand behind me. That is not true for a lot of people. And this is where allyship really comes into play. I think that certainly individuals need to put their safety first, both their emotional safety, their physical safety as well. And so I think it's really important for us to be aware that no matter what industry you're in, that we need those allies to feel that sense of safety and, frankly, wholeness.
And Christie, one of the many reasons why I'm so impressed by you is that you've been open in the past about knowing, as a white woman, just the influence that you have in advocating for the LGBTQ plus community. How has that advocacy changed throughout your career? What are you focused on right now?
Well, I think it's changed a lot. I think that when I was younger, I certainly, because I grew up in such a big family, there's 6 girls in my family, I never felt as a woman that I was going to be held back. I was fortunate to have parents who really taught me the value of owning my voice and using my voice to help those who are disadvantaged or are the voiceless. Now, being an intersectional woman, being LGBTQI, on top of that, I did lose my voice with my own advocacy. I will say, when I had that watershed moment that I felt that I could live my true self, I, happened to that year get a telephone call many years ago from one of my colleagues to say, "Hey, Christie, we need you to represent the firm at Out and Equal." And I was kind of like, "Well, who are you and how'd you get my phone number? How'd you know I was gay?" Right? Because I don't necessarily lead with that. And I went to the Out and Equal Summit that year, and it changed everything for me in terms of advocacy. I knew I had a responsibility to actually live up to that childhood challenge that our parents gave us, which is to give voice to the voiceless. I think since then, I've never looked back. I have gotten louder and louder and louder. And today, I would say I am unapologetically loud and proud to support any marginalized community. It is not only what I believe is my responsibility, but it is my passion, and to do it with as much vigor as I can possibly put behind it.
Well, speaking of finding your voice, I have to ask you about Carl Nassib recently coming out as the first openly gay player in the NFL. When you see moments like that, what does it tell you in terms of how far we need to go, but how far we've come?
Well, first of all, how cool. What a courageous young man. God, I sound so old saying young man, but he is a lot younger than I am. He just showed tremendous passion, courage, and just kind of like, this is who I am, live with it, right? I loved that. I think that we are making progress, and things like that, show that progress. But there are still far too many of us who are hiding in the shadows, and we must do something about that. We must reach out on an individual basis in our companies, in our communities, and reach out a hand and extend a hand to those that are marginalized. And certainly the LGBTQI community really lives at peril in some places around the world. And we have to acknowledge that and give voice to that sense of equality.
Well, Christie, I've seen so many members in the stream. So excited that you're joining us today. We have Charles from Washington, D.C. saying hello, Robert from Rochester, Massachusetts, Mohammed is joining us from Egypt, and we have Lakita from Alabama. So we have a lot of diverse audience right now talking about these issues, which is great.
Yeah.
Christie, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some research that Accenture has done recently about the future of work. To say that this last year has just disrupted the world of work would be the understatement of the century. But what I'm curious from you about is, what are you seeing in terms of trends that will particularly benefit diverse populations within the workplace?
Well, I think that the last year, and the research proves this out, has shown us that change can happen. Right? 83% of over 9,000 workers that we surveyed said that they want to return to the office in a hybrid way. Now, that means 2-3 days at work and then the others at home. Of those, and this is kind of a critical statistic, I think, 85% say that they will stay at their company if they can go back to this type of hybrid model. I think that's an extraordinary statistic as we think about the war for talent. And also it points to the power that workers now have that they may not feel like they had before, which is they have the power to choose where and how they want to work moving forward. I also think what our survey pointed out is that there's a new social contract between employer and employee. And that new contract really is composed of something that we call net better off, in research we did around this, which is that the employer has a responsibility with employee to not only help them financially, obviously with employment, but the emphasis on the emotional, mental, and wellness capabilities and benefits that a company delivers need to be in place. They need to create more inclusion in their workplace. They need to create options around physical workplace, whether that's at home or in the office. Our employees over the last year are telling us that purpose and values and this kind of this work and this life and the world and life things, sustainability, inclusion, and diversity matter more than they ever have. And employees are looking for their own development and development of skills so that they can grow and thrive. And these, they are saying, are all things that their employers need to deliver on like they never have before. And
I also found interesting about the research is that you discovered some disconnects in terms of what employers think that their employees need versus what they don't need. I'm going to go ahead and bring up a quote from the research itself and get your take on it. What separates those workers who are productive anywhere, 40%, from those who are disconnected and frustrated, 8%, is not stress, but whether they have the resources on an individual and organizational level to help them be productive anywhere. These resources range from job autonomy and positive mental health to supportive leadership in a digitally mature organization. Christie, how can more managers address this disconnect and not necessarily blame it on stress, but blame it on the structures that are in place in order for that employee to be productive?
Yeah, I think that what our research pointed out more than anything else is that we have to be more disciplined about how we define the work that needs to be done and restructure the way work that gets done, especially in a hybrid manner. What that really says to us is that managers need to learn new skills. Trust, transparency, empathy, those are all things that are going to be a requirement of managers. Again, I think in an unprecedented way. We did some research for what we call the modern CEO, and the same thing was pointed out, that the way that we used to manage or lead as CEOs has drastically changed in this new world. So the development, the learning that we give managers is critical now in order to manage in the new around these kind of values of transparency, trust, and empathy. Yeah. We also need to provide our employees with digital capabilities, and not just digital capabilities in the form of technology, but in terms of digital fluency. How do we teach our employees to be digitally fluent so that they can maximize their potential and the opportunities for them to bring relevance into the way work gets done? Secondly, I think that what we found was that, well, let's talk about the structure of work. If we go back to a model that says I'm in the office or I'm at home, when I come back to the office, it's not to sit in my cubicle and answer emails. It's actually, what is the design that I come back to? And that is to work with my team on specific things that are critical to a project that needs to be done.
It's funny, our offices are open, but I haven't gone back yet. And I had something in the city this morning, and I thought, I didn't even cross my mind that I could go back into the office. But I am looking forward, like you said, to go back to those collaboration tasks and stuff.
Yeah, I am looking forward to getting back to the office as well, and to travel. I was on the phone this morning with a colleague in Germany who said, you have to come over here. And I thought, oh, wow, I can. Yes, I do have to come over there.
Well, Christie, I learn so much every time that I sit down with you. I can tell from the stream that everyone's so appreciative of your time. I hope next time we can do this in person, but happy Pride Day, happy Pride Month, and thanks so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.
Well, thank you, Caroline. Thank everyone who's out there, and happy Pride Month, and stay safe and stay happy.
All right, take care. That was Accenture's Christie Smith talking to us about LGBTQ+ rights in the workplace, and also just what the future of work is going to look like for all of us. I want to thank her for joining us on the show. I'm seeing a bunch of conversation on this topic in the stream, so if you want to continue the conversation, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed, or you can click in mobile on that search box. All right, on Thursday, my colleague Nina Melendez will be sitting down with United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby for a conversation on airlines and the future of flight. You're not going to want to miss that right before 4th of July weekend. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much for joining us.